And I was 3 years into my PhD program, and I said, I'm not very good at this. So I called Dad and said, Dad, I'm not good at this. And he said, I wasn't a good chemist either. And I was like, I wish you would have told me this 3 years ago, and I might have made some different decisions.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Haresh Singhani. This is Conversations with Haresh. We'll be talking to people of varied backgrounds, covering various topics. I'm very excited to be able to share these with you. The goal is to increase curiosity and empathy amongst all of us to help us grow professionally and personally at all levels. And of course, we also want to make sure that this is fun. So thank you again, and we'll look forward to having you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. This session, we'll be talking to David Glick. He's currently the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Services Group at Walmart, which is a very consequential and a significant role that he has. David has been in the technology domain and leadership domain in different technology companies for well over 2 decades. He started with a PhD in physics, spent almost 2 decades at Amazon. He's now at Walmart. David has been very generous, sharing his experiences and techniques in leadership, in technology, in dealing with people, and also how he's leveraged empathy and feedback to help himself and others grow. And so I'm really excited for this episode, and I hope you'll find it as fun and enjoyable and educational as I did. Morning, David.
Morning, Haresh. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for making time for our little podcast here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Appreciate your time and also, of course, the exciting conversation we're about to have. So I had sent you over a list of things that we'll discuss a little bit today, but roughly speaking, the sequence is what you're doing, how success has come or been achieved in professional life, maybe even personal life. We'll go through some lessons and failures, probably one or two that you might be able to highlight, which I'm sure we all have enough.
We have a few of those.
And then we'll look at kind of how some of the techniques and experiences that have been successful for you in terms of integrating the personal and the professional towards kind of achieving larger life goals, including happiness and, whatever we're after, personally speaking. So to start us off, if you want to give us a quick rundown of your journey, work, in life, etc. Feel free to include whatever you wish to include. I'm sure you've done this before, so if we can start that, that'd be great.
Yeah, it seems like I start a different place each time, but I'll start with my dad was a professor of chemistry and eventually a university administrator. So I always thought I was going to be a professor. And, I went to University of Michigan and got a degree in physics. I went to grad school and I was 3 years into my PhD program. And I said, I'm not very good at this. So I called Dad and said, Dad, I'm not good at this. And he said, I wasn't a good chemist either. And I was like, I wish you would have told me this 3 years ago, and I might have made some different decisions. When I was growing up, he was the Dean of Arts and Science. And so what I saw him doing that I wanted to do was not actually being a chemist. It was being a leader of people, making decisions and helping mentor folks. And so serendipitously, that's kind of where I ended up as well. I did the last 2 or 3 years of grad school, and my wife was a really good biochemist. We decided we'd go wherever she got a postdoc, and that happened to be Seattle. Serendipitously, one of my friends who was in the physics program worked at Amazon. And so she was able to refer me. And I went to the interview and said, I don't have any experience nor technical skills, but you should hire me. And based on her referral, they were able to hire me. And so I started as an IT PM. You may remember everybody wanted to work on the website. And I got sent to the warehouse because I was the low guy. And that ended up starting my journey into supply chain. And I found that I loved the physical nature, picking things up, putting them in the boxes, putting them on trucks. And the people who work at the warehouse are the closest people who touch our customers, wherever you work. In any fulfillment company or any e-commerce company, they're the closest to the customer. So that was really fulfilling. For the next 20 years, I ended up doing different jobs at Amazon, finishing up back-end operations, leading software development for all of the software that takes to get your stuff from port to porch, as they say, from China to your house. And so that was a big deal.
Your current role, I think you've had a couple of other stopping points in between Walmart and Amazon.
After I left Amazon, I retired. The idea was not a sabbatical. The idea was to go back or never go back to work. What I found is retirement sucks. Retirement's really boring. I needed the social activity, and I didn't have the wherewithal to, find that outside of work. There was a tipping point where a friend, and we had planned lunch, and, we planned it 6 weeks out, but she's really busy. And that morning she texted me and said, oh, sorry, my boss needs me to write this paper. I have to cancel lunch. And so I sat at home all day watching Netflix, feeling sorry for myself. And I said, I better go back to work, mostly because I need the social interaction. And so I cast around, and fortunately, another piece of serendipity, a venture capitalist who lived on Mercer Island, put me in touch with Flex. And so I went to work there, about 3 months later, and spent 4 years there as a CTO. We built a warehouse management system, an order management system. I spent 3.5 years there. I found that it was time for me to leave. My lieutenant had grown up. We had a good succession plan in place. And when I left, I wanted to work for a leader who I respected. I came to Walmart to work for Suresh. I guess that's the short version of the whole story.
Makes sense. I think last time we met, you had mentioned you were in a potentially a different role, but you have a slightly different role now at Walmart. And one of the posts I saw on LinkedIn was that you guys move fast, and then you're like, here I am in a new role within a few months of just joining, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the fun things about being at a big company is there's lots of opportunity. And Walmart does move fast. They're really good at developing people and rotating them around. So I came to be the head of supply chain. By the time I got here, I was in charge of engineering operations, and now I'm in charge of what they call enterprise business services. That includes everything it takes to run the business from the back office, financial systems and services, people systems and services, governance, IT. So the laptop I'm talking to you from was provisioned by my team. When we were starting, everybody wanted to be on the website. That was cool. And then the last 10 years, it's been everybody wants to be part of supply chain. That's cool. But if you think about who are the only people in the organization who touch every associate every day, it's the folks who are provisioning laptops and making sure the Wi-Fi runs and running payroll and balancing the books. And so, I'm pretty excited about this new opportunity. It's a space I haven't been in, but I expect that the same leadership traits that have been good in the past are going to take me forward here as well.
Every piece is like car wheels, right? You can't have cars with three wheels if it's a typical car quote, right? You could have a car that has three wheels, but it's probably going to be a different kind of car than four wheels. So the enablers have to be there of any business, every business, right? And then there, of course, there's product, which is kind of core, a little bit more core to the business. But the enablers, I think, are just as critical. There was a friend, he is an executive it was called Wave Broadband. Now it's called Astound, I think. And he had a saying which is, there's great career opportunity in sanitation, which is basically sometimes taking up things that may be less popular at the time, but usually those areas tend to be neglected. Sometimes you can come in and provide more intensity and better frameworks, etc., and you can really enable the enterprise to perform at a higher level. Maybe you might have some examples like this in many areas that you worked at. There were neglected areas that became such bright areas that people actually wanted to go work there.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, again, when I went to the FCs in 1999, nobody wanted to work there. I was the first technologist who was, single-threaded, dedicated to operations. And I made sure that everybody had a keyboard, everybody had an Xterm, and so on. And, now that's operations is the center of everything in many ways. And, we've read about supply chain snafus for the last 3 years. And, logistics is the way e-commerce runs. And that's the differentiator for any company who can't do logistics isn't going to succeed in e-commerce. And so that's an example. My first week in Bentonville, there was a guy who'd been at Walmart for 46 years. He was a janitor in the DC, and Mr. Sam was out there, and he said, that guy works really hard. Let's move him to the home office, to corporate. So he said, well, I don't want to sweep floors at the home office. And so Mr. Sam made him a data engineer. And so he spent his next literally 45 years working in different parts of IT. And when I met him, he had his 5 rules to live by. And he immediately started telling me, I wrote a LinkedIn post a few months ago about it. But the second one was live your life upside down. Everybody wants to do the cool stuff, whatever's the shiny object of the day, be it advertising or supply chain or website. You will get much joy from being the person who keeps the business running. And his example was Y2K. Y2K was not what everybody wanted to do, but it ended up keeping the world running. And you can argue if it was going to break or not, but certainly it was something important that every company had to comply with. And so he went deep on that. I've kept that in mind. The other thing he told me was get over it. Whatever you're complaining about, we are lucky to be alive. We're lucky to be employed at Walmart. We're lucky to get a paycheck. And so get over whatever your issues are and go do your job. That touched me.
That leads me to one of the things we had earlier mentioned we wanted to discuss, which is this concept of tenants and also leading large teams when you can't personally, if it's not proprietary. How big is your team now?
It's big. I can't share exactly what the number is, but it's
thousands, right? I'm guessing it's probably thousands. There's physically, it's impossible to kind of reach out and touch everybody or know everybody's name or get to meet everybody on any frequency. How do you kind of influence the organization without being prescriptive, right? And of course, there's this use of tenants that different leaders have perfected well before you and I. So any thoughts on that?
What we end up doing often is making things too complex. And if you want to influence across many, many layers, many countries, many people, many sites, you have to start from sort of first principles thinking. I can get 1 or 2 or 3 things done. think my parents said the mayor can probably have 3 projects that he is personally involved in, and then he has to let the city run. And so there's a couple things that I'm super passionate about. One of them is continuous deployment. You have to say, like, these are my priorities. You have to say them very concisely, frequently. They say it takes 6 to 9 touches or 6 to 9 hearings. The advertising and marketing folks say you have to hit people 6 to 9 times. And so I try to be very careful about what I say, because if I say the wrong things or if I mention something that's not important to me, people will run off and do it. And so I always try to preface with, like, in general, I want you all to make good decisions. My job is to empower you, not to tell you what to do. And if you're running around doing the things that I tell you to do, we're probably going to lose. The worst things you want in an employee is them to do exactly what you tell them to do. That said, there's a few things that are super important to me, and I want to make those very clear, both to the leadership team, but also any chance. We do a monthly all hands. So any chance to put those front and center is really good. And I learned that from leaders in the past. One of the things that this leader said was, I go into meetings and I say the same thing. And when I start hearing it repeated back to me, that's when I know I've been effective. And so, when you walk into a meeting and people say, we're going to do continuous deployment, it's top of our list, I've been effective. And so you have to go see people, right? I've got a big team in India. I've had big teams in India before, as well as all over the country. And you have to go and you have to be present. You have to be a leader. That means you have to be on, see all the people. You have to have conversations, and, it's meaningful, right? That's the most meaningful part of the job, but it's exhausting.
I was speaking with a gentleman, I think he was at Sun. This is when Sun was still Sun, double-digit number of years ago. This was when, in the early days, the kind of longshoring or offshoring was happening. There were a lot of teams that were having mixed success, leveraging teams in other parts of the world, mainly at the time. This is probably 15 years ago. It was India. This gentleman, I forget his full name, but he was he was probably a mid-level manager, director, or vice president or something like that at Sun at the time. And he had the best success and then Sun was one of the early adopters of the distributed workforce, right? Leveraging global workforce, especially in India. They had design centers in India very early. He was saying this, what you just mentioned was the biggest secret that he had. He had the best performing India team in the whole company at the time. And he said most executives are not willing or able, or they're not conscious enough to go and actually spend time there. And that was the biggest reason for limiting the growth of those teams and team members, because they never got the energy, the perception that they were a priority. It's a video conference here, phone call there, email there, et cetera, and the energy doesn't quite flow like that.
Yeah, and Walmart. One of the things they do, in whether it's India or just the stores over in Mississippi or in Texas, that's it's only a few hours drive, but it's a long way from headquarters or a long way from the home office. One thing that Mr. Sam started out was he would visit the stores, he would visit the distribution centers. And what people tell me is that he remembered the name of every single person he met. And so he could have met them 5 years ago and, an associate who's sweeping the floor, and he would remember their name, their kid's name, where their kids went to school. That was something that sets a culture. And, still today, every week there's executives flying around to the stores and meeting the people, meeting the store managers and the leaders and talking to the associates. And I think that's one of the things that's magical about this place. And the folks who are senior executives here, they worked in stores. Many of the senior executives start out pushing carts or running a forklift in the store or in the distribution center. And so that makes it a really special culture.
The U.S. or maybe even the world, but the U.S. has had many, many super successful retail leaders. And my team happens to have worked with some of our local brethren here at Costco and Senegal, right, who probably overlapped somewhat with Mr. Sam. He would be in the store. He would be wearing store products, right? So his shirt would be from the pile of shirts that you and I would grab one from, that I think really helped with the troops and with empathy factor, but also understanding the business at a very, very frontline level. But that's great to hear. Are there things about Walmart, do you think, that are internal that, of course not proprietary, that you think the world maybe doesn't know enough, that makes it successful and a great place to grow?
First of all, I'll repeat that many and most of the executives have worked in stores or worked in fulfillment centers or worked in distribution centers. So they understand that the associates are number one. The most important job is the associate. That's a hard job. Standing up and sorting shirts and whatnot is a hard job. I think that's number one. I think they have a great sort of rotation/development program. And so they are very intentional, much more than other places I've seen, saying, these people are good. Let's rotate them to a store manager. And we just published that 75% of our store managers started as hourly associates. You can start out making whatever minimum wage. You can get to be a store manager, then a market manager, and a district manager. One of the women I met at one of the orientations, she's now a VP leading our asset protection. And she said she literally grew up in the stores. She'd go over after school, and her mom was an assistant store manager. And, now, I don't know, 20, 30 years later, she's a VP. That's a big deal. And I think that's something special about Walmart.
There's a lot of commentary, right, out there about the comp models of different companies, etc. People or different companies get portrayed in different light as it regards to comp models. Large companies such as Walmart, I think, are really successful at creating huge opportunities for a large swath of people. And it's kind of hard to measure that against the criticism that, might be leveled. But I was talking to a business partner and a friend, and he was highlighting how it's very likely that a lot of the associates that are in Walmart would have fairly limited growth options if it wasn't necessarily for a company like Walmart being in their neighborhood or in their towns. Sometimes you compare comp levels in different companies, but what people forget is that there are certain roles that are made available because they're the only roles available in many, many locations and locales with those skill levels. And so I think those people can be many of them are very grateful for having that opportunity when nothing else is available. And sometimes we kind of lose maybe the side of that fact. But that's one of the things that I personally didn't know that is actually quite positive. Walmart happens to enable in many, many locations and places around the country.
And I know Walmart's made a huge investment in raising the wages of the folks in the stores over the last several years, which is super important. But it is true that if you are a Walmart associate and you perform well, you have opportunities to reach the American dream effectively, change your spot in life. And we read every day about income inequality. The American dream is not accessible. This is a place where the American dream is accessible.
I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, and then I want to move over to the kind of lesson side. I'm going to skip over some of the topics we had discussed earlier because we have a shortened version of the time window here. Marrying the people or org charts and technology architecture. Obviously, when you have responsibility for large swaths of a corporate landscape, you're probably not getting into the weeds of too much technology or individual technology pieces or technology content. How do you currently still influence that or get involved? And then how do you simplify the task of determining whether technologically the team is on the right path or maybe tweaks might be needed?
I had a great leader who I worked for. She gave me this framework, which I repeat over and over again, and it seems to resonate. It's resonated with me, seems to resonate with people I talk to, which is product, process, people. As a junior engineer or first line, all you're doing is producing what you're doing while you're at work. As you get up to first line manager, principal engineer, you're building processes which help other people more successful. These could be around operational excellence or analyzing which are the right people and so on. And then as you're getting to director, senior director, VP, you have to leverage all the people around you. So I spend a lot of time assessing people, find the right people, put them in the right seats. So, I have to surround myself. One of my team members in the past said, at your level, you have to have 100% trust in the people around you because you can't dive in and audit every single thing. I have to get my directs to be people that I completely trust to make good decisions. And then I have to teach them that they have to do the same with their directs and so on. And so again, this is one of the things that you have to send the message simply that we care about people. It's the right thing to do to be empathetic and to invest in people's careers and lives. But B, it actually makes you more successful because, if you have a large team, you can't be in the details of everything. So you have to trust the people around you. My lesson is it's all about the people. And, at Walmart, our thinking is we're a people-led, tech-empowered company. And so it's always people first.
How would you say your training in physics, how has it influenced your growth and maybe understanding or success?
I think one of my superpowers is to always stay on the critical path. What are the things we need to do to accomplish these things? And, as a physicist, you may hear the term first principles thinking, repopularized by some of the tech folks on the West Coast. I like to think that I've got first principles thinking. Hey, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of details of the architecture. In the end, what do we need to do to deliver the project, the program, the process, the product? I think that comes from my physics background. We did this personality assessment called the Hogan. They gave us the results as an organization, and they said a lot of the technologists are high on innovation but low on pragmatism. And I asked them, what do I do that for? How do I use that? And they said, do you have any times when you get things 90% of the way, but they're not in production? Oh, yeah. And everybody laughed and said, yeah, we've seen that. I'm high on pragmatism, and I'm probably lower than some on innovation. And so I feel my role is not to necessarily dive deep into the architecture or think of the whiz-bang things. Once we have people who've thought of those things, I help them get across the finish line.
Obviously, in physics, there are many large efforts or massive numbers. So people involved in different initiatives, and hopefully enough of them are, or apparently enough of them are practical to get it all done, right? But sometimes you get these massive delays and massive failures.
Yeah. If you think about if you're doing a PhD, especially in science, you can't get out until you deliver your project.
That's true. That's true. And sometimes that's tough from many angles. What about lessons in kind of failing and then recovering? And how do you help your current teams think about that? And how have you thought about it in the past?
I think about the West Wing. Like all good leadership lessons come from the West Wing, in my opinion. And if you haven't watched that show, it's from the early 2000s. You should go back and watch it. But there was an episode where Sam Seaborn, which is Rob Lowe's character, made a big mistake, and it was on CNBC or CNN about how badly he screwed up. And Leo, who was the chief of staff, said, I see a Sam Seaborn size hole in the wall he just ran into, but I'd rather have him run full speed into the brick wall than have him tiptoe around it. And so, that's how I think about failures. I'd rather fail doing something. I've heard people say, I think Bill Gates has said this among others, a sin of omission is worse than a sin of commission. So I'd rather fail doing something to my best extent than to peter out. I want to go with a bang, not a whimper.
Now, I want to ask you about balancing life. You have such a demanding role. It could be easy to get into bad habits, eating habits, sleeping habits, maybe even some of that then exhibiting itself in the way you conduct yourself at work, etc. Are there techniques and experiences that you're using to create balance and make sure you're staying true to your true north at a personal level, whatever those may be?
Yeah. One of the things I find is in the office, even at a senior level, but even more so at a less senior level, you don't always have control. And so, the worst times that I've had at work is when I feel like I don't control what's going on and things are happening to me rather than me happening to those things. One of the things I fell back on is I can control how much weight I can lift. When things were bad, I would go to the gym and I would, squat heavy, CrossFit exercises, be exhausted. And you do that for a few weeks and you start to see progress. And, I've throughout my whole life struggled with my weight. As you say, you eat badly, you don't have time to exercise and it goes up and, you feel bad and it's sort of a vicious cycle. Just a few months ago, I had a cold, and after that, I had a cough that was a lingering cough that lasted for months, and it just sucked the life out of me, right? Because you're trying to do your job, and you can't sleep because you're coughing, and you're just tired all the time. I did the 5 whys, which is like, why do I have a cough? Oh, it's because postnasal drip, not because of the chest. Okay, why do I have postnasal drip? Because I'm congested. Well, why am I congested? And I remembered that my trainer taught me that I have a gluten allergy, and most of us do. I was like, cut out the gluten. And within 2 days, I wasn't coughing anymore. Within a week, I'd lost 5 pounds. And so I'm like, well, let me double down on this and cut out gluten, cut out dairy, cut out carbs. Been on the road last 2 weeks and I lost another 3 pounds, 4 pounds on the road. I went and bought a scale at Walmart and I was able to, I'll tell you this, I was able to order my scale from my hotel. An hour later, it was ready to pick up. I drove to the store. I didn't even have to get out of the car. They just put it in my trunk. And so that's something, sorry, I'm conflating two things, but one is, take control. Focus on your health, focus on something you can control. Second is Walmart has a real competitive advantage with last mile delivery because no one really has been successful with 1 hour delivery. And while it's cool to have things delivered, there's a Walmart 8 minutes from my hotel here. I was able to do something that I couldn't do from any other e-commerce company, which is get my scale so that I could keep excited about my health every day because I like to weigh in every morning. First several weeks here, I felt like an outsider. I have to admit that. And I talked to a friend of mine and she's like, you better start your meditation. I had been frustrated with some things. And then I started meditating 10 minutes every morning when I woke up and it just changed my whole outlook. And I said, I'm letting things happen to me. I need to start driving things. And I did. Started that day and made all the difference in the world. The other thing is when you're traveling, I don't sleep well on the road, either because of jet lag or because of hotel or whatever. Doing this 10-minute yoga nidra meditation in the morning will help me have energy throughout the day. And sometimes I'll go sit in my office for 15 minutes and do another 10 minutes at 3:00. That'll get me through the evening. Someone introduced me to this. My most tenured friend, my oldest friend from junior high, sent this to me about 3 years ago, and it has really changed my life. I'll stop, and then I'll get frustrated. Then I better do my yoga nidra again. So I recommend it highly.
I have added a little bit of morning yoga in the last 6 months in my morning routine. There's a pose called Padmasana where you sit cross-legged. And it looks painful, but eventually when you get to it, it's actually amazing. It's interesting. I started in India, right? My life journey, but I've been very skeptical of yoga, but now age cures all ego. And so now I'm trying it because my wife has been using some of the traditions and the techniques and they seem to be helping her quite a bit. Speaking of gluten, I can't have gluten. I discovered that about 13 years ago. And I had a similar experience when I stopped eating gluten within like a day. I used to have a different watch, but it was loose on my wrist because of all the, inflammation and water retention that had reduced almost immediately. Maybe there are a bunch of things that all of us can do to make ourselves better and then bring that extra level of energy to our lives and to our work, be better team members and team drivers. I had mentioned you could put me on the spot if you want to return the favor with any questions you might have.
If you had one life lesson to share, or one, I guess I shared product, process, people. What's your one framework or tenet that you live by, or that you think you have to share for the?
I have same, except I add projects because that's kind of the pragmatism, but that also overlaps with process, which is getting stuff done. You got to ship. So that's one of the core things that I practice. For me, at a very broad level, driven by curiosity and empathy, right? So I tell people that you probably can't have enough of those two things, no matter how much you have. And the more kind of senior and influential you become, probably you need even more of that, right? Mr. Bill Gates used to say that he would read some magazines cover to cover, regardless of whether he was interested in a topic or not. And that's how he broadened his horizon. And so I think increasing curiosity and empathy is really critical for being successful, right? And then there's the emotional IQ. People mentioned that coachability, etc., for us to be successful. As you mentioned, personally speaking, health-wise, we need to have balance. So everything in moderation, except for moderation, right? Yeah, the world's big, and there are many paths to I think success or happiness or balance. And we all, I think, as we go through our journeys, we'll get maybe too much on one extreme or another, and it'll cause either health issues, family issues, or work issues, and then hopefully you can come back. Our journey since Amazon days has been, or at least our mutual Amazon days, my journey has been quite a bit different. I've been more on the entrepreneurship side. I've also ran advisory teams like I do now. And so one of the things we say is that we map meaningful problems to people who find them meaningful to solve. And so that comes from Jim Collins, Built to Last, Good to Great author, right? And he had a quote in that they're saying that we're all in search for a meaningful life, and you can't have meaningful life without meaningful work. And so indeed, we're all in search for meaningful work. And so that's one of the things that I also encourage people to think about, which is because we spend more time working than doing anything else when we're awake and when we're productive in our lives. It's like, how are you spending your time? Are you growing and feeling rewarded, etc. And what can you tweak if that's not the case, right? A couple, three things in there to answer your question.
Yeah, I know that, the book Radical Candor, or the idea of radical candor, includes, having hard discussions, but with empathy. The cliche is feedback is a gift. None of us will get better without feedback. But just yelling at someone is not effective. Giving feedback where you have their best interest in mind and you're leading with empathy is kind of the secret to success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to ask you about parting thoughts. Do you have any one or two things? I know we kind of almost started talking about that.
I would encourage people. You hear a lot about people don't like their jobs these days and they don't want to go to work. And it's like, find a place that you like to work. Work can be awesome. And, I've been blessed to, work at three great places. And, I'm like, I can't believe they trust me to do all of these cool things and to move the lever. And, I have the power at Walmart to affect the lives of 2 million people. And then all of the customers beyond that. So hundreds of millions of people, I've been giving the gift and opportunity to help, hundreds of millions of people, save money and live better. And so if you don't feel that way about your work, go find something where you feel that way.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's a great parting thought, I think. Keep searching for more meaningful work if you're not quite satisfied. That's a good way to go. Thank you so much, David, to spend some time on this Friday. I know you've got some travel and busy day ahead of you, so we'll let you go. But I will look forward to having you back, by the way. There's a couple of three or maybe 20 things to kind of dissect a little bit more that we touched on. But I really appreciate your time. I know Rob's in the background. Thanks for making this happen. We'll have you back soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, man. Good to see you. Good to talk.